Good evening and a warm welcome to this, I think it's the third or the fourth, getting into the third event. I'm Professor Paul Kaufman, Dean of the Faculty of Business and Economics at the University of Melbourne. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the unceded land on which tonight's event is taking place. And I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the importance of Indigenous knowledge in the academy. As a community of researchers, teachers, professional staff and students, we are privileged to work and learn every day with Indigenous colleagues and partners. I extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us here tonight. It truly is a privilege to welcome you all here this evening for the third Agribusiness Fireside Chat at the University of Melbourne. The event tonight was made possible by the very generous support from the Samuel and June Horden Endowment. We are pleased that Rupert Meyer has joined us this evening. Welcome, Rupert. We are very pleased that you're here with us this evening. So a special welcome to you. Tonight's discussion, Smart Farms, How AI is Transforming Agribusiness, is an important topic that we need to tackle in some detail. As the world faces increasing pressure to produce more food sustainably in the face of climate change, resource constraints, and shifting consumer demands, innovation has never been more critical. Of course, we've been there before. Think Club of Rome and the high-yielding varieties that followed. So I'm hopeful, but I'm hopeful to learn more tonight. We have an impressive panel of industry and academic experts that has joined us this evening to explore how Australia, particularly its rural and regional areas, is exploring exploring how cutting-edge technologies from precision crop management and autonomous systems to climate-smart analytics and sustainable finance. Whether all these things are helping farmers optimize resources, strengthen supply chains, and build a resilience against future disruptions. With us on the panel to tackle these questions are Dr. Alexis Pang, School of Agriculture, Food and Ecosystem Sciences, Faculty of Science, the University of Melbourne, Associate Professor Nir Lipovetsky at the School of Computing and Information Systems, Faculty of Engineering and IT at the University of Melbourne, Dr. Dave Henry, Chief Research Scientist, Digital Agriculture Strategic Growth Area, CSIRO, and Josie Zilm, Agribusiness Executive, National Australia Bank. The panel discussion will be moderated by my colleague, Professor Tava Olsen, Deputy Dean Academic, Melbourne Business School. Tonight's discussion is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our faculty website. Following the panel discussion, there will be an opportunity for audience questions, which will be moderated by Professor Tava Olsen. But you might already start thinking what you want to ask. And with that, I invite the panel members to the stage, and I'll give the floor to Professor Olsen. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for inviting me to moderate what I hope is a very interesting panel tonight. It's great to see everybody here. I've been asked by at least one person I talked to keep it very concrete. So fellow panelists, people are very interested in this topic. So there's our challenge. We often think of agriculture as low tech, but it's really not. You know, there's a lot of high tech agriculture And there's always been a lot of innovation and technology in agriculture. If you think about the first industrial revolution with the spinning jenny and power looms, what were they weaving? They were weaving an agricultural product, right? Wool. So, it's always been the case that we've seen innovation in agriculture, and our focus today is another innovation in agriculture, which is where is AI taking us? So I'll ask each of our panelists just to briefly say your name. I mean, Paul introduced your titles, but a little bit, but also to talk a bit about your area of expertise in terms of this panel. So.
All right, I'll go first.
Yes, thank you.
So, right, hi everyone. I'm Alexis Pang. I'm with the School of Agriculture, Food and Ecosystem Sciences. I'm a soil scientist, and I guess my area is in soil science, but also I've been interested in sensors and sensor systems. And that was actually driven by a childhood fascination with maps. And I've always loved maps, looking at maps when I was growing up. And I guess when I got into university, GIS first started coming up. And so, now digital maps. And so, if you think a picture paints 1,000 words, a map actually probably gives you 100,000 words, things about what you see. And so I've pursued that in my studies and also in my teaching. And right now I coordinate a subject called Applications in Precision Agriculture, and that allows me to immerse myself in various different possible technologies and the flood of data that we're actually swimming in agriculture, and convey that to my students. And also, of course, working on various different projects in this area. So just one more thing, I think I have to share a core childhood memory, which some of you might know. The TV TV show Knight Rider that had that had a talking car, and an intelligent talking car that could interact with David Hasselhoff with the star. Save him out of tight situations. So there you go.
Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Josie Zilm, and I'm NAB's Agribusiness Executive. So I'm just from Gippsland, actually. I'm not too far down the road, and I've got a beef farm there. But my day job at NAB, overseeing NAB's agribusiness portfolio nationally. So NAB are one of, Australia's largest agribusiness lender. So of lending to agriculture in Australia, NAB lends about a third of that. So we're a significant player in the market, but equally interested in and involved in the evolution of technology and commercialisation of technology, so we can have profitable farmers who are future ready as well. So working across multiple industries, all states and territories, and there's not an ag industry that isn't involved in some sort of research, development, and usage of tech. So really looking forward to the discussion today.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Tava. So I'm Dave Henry. I'm from CSIRO. I'm within what we call the Agriculture and Food Research Unit, live on the other side of Geelong. When we think about AI, it's really broad, and I'm sure we'll cover off some of that tonight. I'm very much at the applied end. So I work with some really smart people that I just am bewildered with sometimes, technologists and data scientists and climate scientists and modelers. And I'm very much at the end of so what? How do we make them usable? How do we get information into the hands of the end user that is actionable and people can create value from them? So that's sort of my end of the spectrum. And I was trying to think about what was my first real interaction with anything I could vaguely call AI related. And when I first started my career back in WA, I won't say when that was, we were developing a product that ended up being a global first in terms of using satellite information to quantitatively estimate the amount of pasture that was in every paddock on a farm. And the challenge really was converting what was a really cool science-like publication into getting data that's derived from 700 kilometres up above the surface of the earth into the hands of a farmer that would make decisions daily or weekly. and enable them to make decisions that are informed about the risk and give them some certainty or some information about the future. So that was my first real foray into AI related. I'm sure we'll get into what that means. But just going back, I'm sort of more on that applied end and really keen to see how people create value from these technologies.
Good, thanks.
Cool. So I'm Neil Lipovetsky. I'm on the other side. I'm more in the theory end. And my main passion is about sequential decision making. Sequential decision making is also known as AI planning and automated planning. And it started since the inception of AI, 1950s. Few words, what is AI planning? I would say is the art and science of thinking before acting. Okay, and when you look at Daniel Kahneman, he described that in our head we have two systems. We have system one, which is fast, associative. You don't need effort. You don't realize that you're using it. Think about when you walk, when you cycle. Those are decisions you are making. And then you have system two, which takes effort. You need to compute. You need to be fully aware that you're engaging with your brain. Think when you're planning a wedding or you're planning the next crop rotation. So AI planning is system two. I'm focused on actually building models that we can use in order to make useful decisions and algorithms that actually can scale up. So part of what I love from engaging with these events is that in real world applications is where you find the most beautiful theory at the end. So very nice, challenging theoretical work can come always from applications.
Thank you. So we'll start with a question for all panelists, which is, what is a concrete exemplar of AI being used in agriculture today? And kind of why do you think that's a good example for the, of AI use in ag?
Yep, I'll go first. As a soil scientist, I'm going to keep talking about soils. But I think it's important because, soil is the foundation of agriculture. And as a soil scientist, what I love to do is actually to get a hole dug for me and into a soil pit and actually see the different soil horizons, the different layers in the soil, because that gives you a very clear visualization and understanding on how things move through the soil profile. Water, microorganisms, larger organisms, nutrients. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that it's pretty tedious and destructive to be digging holes all over the place. So one of the great innovations I've seen, and actually it isn't quite widespread, but I think the technology is already quite well established and the tool is actually out there, is actually a digital soil core. And so what you have is a core that actually is pushed into the ground, and as it pushes into the ground, it is able to sense pressure. This, of course, helps you to determine the level of compaction and the type of soil texture that you're pushing through. But also, together with that core, there are lenses that help to sense the soil as it goes through the various horizons down to about a meter plus, 1.2 meters. And you can actually sense the organic matter content. You can actually sense the moisture content. You can actually also sense the soil texture through the soil profile. And so with that sort of technology and device, you can actually do a much more detailed and distributed survey of soil across a paddock, across different areas, and create a map. And map that soil variability and deal with that variability in a much more targeted way. So that's that. One device that really comes to mind that I'm really quite impressed with.
Thanks.
Yes.
Jesse, same
That's
question.
interesting. I'm going to ask you about that later in more detail. So working with the bank, I often have a lot of interactions with people who have technology that they'd like to either pitch to us. So we've got venture capital funds that, AgTech will pitch to us, or we bank a lot of AgTech companies as well. So depending on the scale of where they are on their commercialisation journey. But I think the most interesting thing that has really stayed with me is one day when I was on farm and was just chatting to a couple who have a really nice cropping enterprise. So it's in different geographic locations across different states. And this person had created his own farm management software. Now, I didn't really, you know, farmers are pretty skilled in a broad range of areas, but I'd never come across a farmer who was great at coding. But he said, oh, just, you know, I've always loved coding and I've built my own farm management software. What AI has enabled for him is to be able to accelerate the development of his technology and his software, because he's not, you know, he didn't study coding at uni or anything, he's self-taught, but to be able to use AI has just made his experience so much faster and better. And I was just so impressed that this technology application, it's, you know, for the people as well. So yeah, that's my example.
Good. Thanks.
I'm challenged because I've got about 5 exemplars that I'd want to talk about, but I know there's limited time. I'm conscious that when a lot of people think about AI, their mind immediately turns to things like ChatGPT and what we call generative AI and chatbots and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of one end of the spectrum, if you like, in terms of AI. I'm going to come back just a little bit to what is possibly more traditionally known as things like machine learning applications, for my example. And I was trying to think about how to coach this from a use case perspective. So I'm going to just frame it as predicting yield. So my example starts off with a commercial product that is available for the irrigated cotton industry, which is basically a sensor that you can put in the field. It monitors the canopy of the crop as it's growing, and it sends data up into the cloud where there's some really smart analytics that are done. And it just monitors the growth as it goes along. But up in the cloud, what it's doing is it's taking that data and it's saying, given the environmental conditions, given the stage of crop development, given what the outlook for the season is, we predict the yield will be X. Now that's pretty cool to be predictive, but then what it does, it says, all right, the key decisions around managing an irrigated cotton crop is water management. Do I irrigate more frequently, less frequently, more water, less water? And it will actually play out those scenarios so that you can actually make real-time decisions as to what the estimated impact on the final product is. So suddenly you're getting an estimate on your economic return for that based on what you do now. So that's really quite cool. So it takes in some sensor development, some cloud analytics, some smart analysis that goes up in the cloud. And then I thought, well, that's a really fine scale example. That's one sensor in a paddock, and everyone says, well, how many sensors do you need for my whole paddock? And answer all those questions. So I'm going to jump to predicting yield at a national basis now. So it's not something you can achieve with one sensor in a field. But on the back of something, I'm not sure if people have seen, the National Climate Risk Assessment was released a couple of weeks ago. And with that comes the latest standard in climate projection data. Now that's really cool. It sort of says, 10% decrease in annual rainfall by 2050 in this region, or 5% here, or 5% there. It's pretty good, but what does it tell us about risk from a productivity perspective? So what we can do now with sort of AI-related analytics is take that data, right, and actually derive, okay, if there's a 10% decrease in rainfall, then that decrease is in July and August, and it's a 0.5 degree increase in temperature, but that's mostly over the summer period. This is a change in CO2. You can aggregate all those up to say, you know what? What it actually means is a 5% drop in yield anticipated in the absence of any adaptation. And you can do that across the whole broadacre cropping region, for example. So suddenly combining our ability to take the best climate projection data that we have and creating another layer of insight on top on a much broader spatial thing. So when someone's thinking about, oh, I've got a whole portfolio of investments, not pointing at you, Josie, how do I analyse risk across my portfolio? This region's at increased risk. And the reason I wanted to use those two examples is because the first example requires a level of precision. All right? To make a tactical decision about do I water or do I not water takes a level of precision. The latter example, the national, might be more about directionality. Which areas are increasing strength, which areas are decreasing strength, and where do I target my investments accordingly? So two really distinct examples that lay out differences in scale, but also that issue around precision.
Thank you. Nia.
So, AI is very broad. So I'd like to take, again, the metaphor of System 1 and System 2 to divide a bit two types of applications that are exemplar for agriculture. So in the System 1, so again, thinking fast without even realizing, this is the classic domain where machine learning as a methodology shines, and machine learning is one branch of AI. And typical applications would be classification, pattern recognition, prediction. And when I think about a good example where this can shine is in control environments. And the first thing that comes into my mind is greenhouses. If you go to a greenhouse, you can control the environment. The data that you use to train the models is likely to be closely related to whatever you see in the future. It's likely that you're going to get good results. Now, when I'm thinking about System 2, something that you need to think about sequential decisions, time dependency, risks, limitations, hard constraints. So then I'm thinking about you need to build a model of the world, and you need to actually make sure that whatever solution that you come up with has guarantees. And that's where planning can shine as a methodology. And in terms of an exemplar application, I would say Amazon warehouse, so warehouse management. You've got hundreds of robots moving your stock. And in the agriculture sector, I've seen this used in managing large nurseries. So now your soil should not be static. It can be dynamically moved around. Those are two examples that I think shine. And the key aspect there is that you're controlling the uncertainty. How to get out of that? I leave it.
Great. So when we advertised this, we said we'd talk about precision crop management, which I think we have, climate smart analytics, which we've definitely got to, and autonomous systems, I think we've only sort of touched on. Does anyone want to talk a bit more about autonomy? Yes, you're looking keen.
Autonomy. I mean, what is autonomy? I mean, you touched on robots, you know, and I heard a pitch by a robot developer said, we can put robots across the whole of Northern Australia to round up cattle. Say, cool. Have you taken into account the cattle will probably destroy the poor little robots and take no notice of them? Autonomy is many different things, and I think the role of AI in autonomy holds firm in areas that there are repetitive tasks that can be easily automated. So just as a really simple example, you monitor a tank or a water trough. When the water level drops to a particular level, you turn on the water supply to fill it up. A pretty basic example. What we've got to be careful is there's different types of AI. Right? Generative AI or ChatGPT is non-deterministic. So what that means is it's creative and it's adaptable, but it's not going to give you the same answer every time. Right? So are you going to have it in an aircraft control system? Probably not. Right? Are you going to have it in your car as a lane drifting thing? Probably not. You don't want to be sitting in your car going, ooh, you may want to consider that you're swapping lanes. You want it to actually do something. There are other parts of AI that are deterministic. So think about what it is that you want to be autonomous and the analytics, therefore, that fit that use case. I'll just go on, sorry, just really quickly. Good. Some years ago, we talked about virtual fencing. Virtual fencing is a wearable collar that essentially says where is an animal and it stops it going to a place you don't want it to go, or you direct an animal where it wants to go. That is a form of autonomy. A lot of people don't think about that sort of autonomy, but it's autonomously controlling the location of animals. Now that's a really, really complex system that takes a lot of underlying knowledge of animal behaviour and its environment to actually make that thing work. So I get a little bit like about autonomy, because what is autonomy? There's really simple autonomous systems and there's really critical state things that you probably don't want to make autonomous, and then what analysis you make to fit to suit. So
great.
That's mine.
Thank you. And then Alexis, you said you teach a subject on precision agriculture. Precision agriculture has been around for quite a long time. There's all sorts of research articles written in the 1980s on optimization of farms. What's new about AI in terms of precision agriculture? Is it just doing it better, or is there something? Is there a shift?
I think it's a great question, Tom. I think precision agriculture has always been a core concept of essentially, since long ago, farmers wanting to farm better, right? Getting the best out of their land, managing it, stewardship and all that. And the precision agriculture, as we understand it now, has actually been the outcome of a convergence of various technologies: positioning technologies, sensing technologies, optics, remote sensing. And that, of course, along with that have been a lot of sensors and platforms to deliver those, to collect data. And I recall, like, was it back in 2015 or 2016, I attended probably the first conference on big data and agriculture. And we were actually at the edge, basically, of, well, we already probably were already at the edge of a tsunami coming in of a lot of data. Huge volumes of data coming from various sensors. Even your standard harvester has, yield monitoring sensors and positional located. So now what we have in this situation is a context or environment that is ripe for the application of AI, primarily because there's so much data now. And that now lends itself to modeling based on data, so data-driven approach. So this new phase or paradigm, I would say, of agriculture is quite different from the precision agriculture and modeling, which were quite sort of prescriptive and deterministic, predetermined on what you should do, what those interactions between different factors of plant growth and soil and water, crop variety would actually occur. Now we have a lot of information on how, let's say, a wheat crop responds to a multitude of over different seasons, in different soils, different parts of the landscape in a paddock, in different weather conditions over different seasons and fertilization applications. So all that now has given us, and people are already doing it, gives us data-driven modeling, which basically is what a lot of AI is. Right. So you now can train models based on that data. So that's something really exciting, because there's almost infinite possibilities what you can do with the data and examine the data and then go to the grower and say, well, no, looking at your past 20 years of yield maps, weather records, and your soil maps, and your records of what you've done to your paddock, I think we have a pretty good idea, given the coming season, the climate forecast, this is probably what you might want to do to adapt or to prepare yourself for, say, a drought-like situation that's coming up. Hence, it's really exciting.
Yeah, and the level of dynamism that Nia was talking about, right?
Exactly.
Those type of
Can I just say, on data, one thing I think that is a real barrier to accelerating, the usage of it, is that we've got such a diverse array of data points in agriculture. Like you look at New Zealand and they've got, if you're in the dairy industry, 1, 2 milk companies get that data, and, the FERT companies are, there's far fewer than what we've got here. So that's just one thing I see, is that, that challenge to overcome, to really be able to bring that data together so we can use it holistically. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's an interesting challenge. Can I just, sorry, we're just
Absolutely.
taking over the whole
No, that's good, that's good.
You're the facilitator for a moment. I think that's where AI can actually play a role. Often we get focused on that issue of precision. But maybe in the new world, we've got all this data in all these disparate areas that are siloed. How do we bring that together and have that multi-dimensional view or framing of a problem by bringing the data together? Because I remember, everyone used to talk about big data, and I'm sure that the quantum of data we used to talk about was minuscule to what we're talking about now. But can AI actually have a role in bringing that data together and making sense of it, integrated rather than as siloed?
Right. Interesting. Thanks. So my next question, which is to all the panel, but I'm going to start with you, Josie. How should one decide whether to use AI in agriculture and where to begin?
Of course, if there's an opportunity to work smarter, not harder, you would, definitely. I think that some of the barriers for farmers to actually using the AI that's available to them at the moment, though, comes down to potentially cost. It could also come down to subscription fatigue and this concept of these wide and varied data sources. You can get data and you use the AI in a multitude of different ways, but it can be quite laborious for a farmer to be looking at their soil data, so their moisture, like when to irrigate, and then their weather data, so the Bureau telling us when it's going to rain, and then the tissue data from the sample that we've taken, and the soil test that says we need to put on nitrogen. So this is probably the barrier that I touched on, is that there's so many points out there that we can use to make really informed decisions, but having the time to actually take it up and make a meaningful decision from it, I think is, that tipping point that the farmers say, well, you know what, I could sit here remotely and have the sensors and the desktop, everything telling me what to do, or I might just go out and have a look and put the shovel in the ground. Yeah, but another trend we're seeing in Australian agriculture is consolidation as well. I think we're having conversation earlier about consolidation across the industry. And we're seeing it because, of course, consumers want to pay a reasonable price for the food that they eat. We need to make sure that we can, afford, and the government doesn't want to see food inflation take off. And so we also then have input price pressures from fertiliser and from energy and from labour. And so farmers are being squeezed. It's not all bad though, because we're seeing consolidation. We're seeing them buy the farm next door. The gateways are getting bigger, so the bigger gear can get through, and it's more worthwhile to use that spatial technology. So I think it's a bit of an evolution. There's some early adopters who are absolutely on the bandwagon, and they're using those bits of technology that make the most sense to them. But there's smaller farming businesses who just can't warrant the expense, and all the time of having all of these, subscriptions, I suppose. Yeah.
So do we risk having haves and have-nots develop?
Well, I think that this, it's economics really, isn't it? Yeah, the haves will be able to afford to, use that, buy the subscription and use the technology, and the have-nots are probably going to sell their land for hopefully a really good price to a neighbour who, can see a good farming business proposition at the end of it. So, yeah, it's a trend that we've seen, and it comes down to economics. Yeah.
Thanks. Anyone else want to tackle the same?
What was it? You might want to...
It was, where do you start? If you're thinking about introducing AI into your, you're working in agribusiness, yeah.
Can I just try and separate it to two different sort of users? So we've got an agribusiness, a company that says, I want to build an AI-enabled capability within my business. And not a farmer, it might be a service provider or a big bank. So from a developer point of view, I think the key things are, make it real. Make it about a problem, a real business problem. Right? Don't go half-assed into it, if I can say that. Make it a real problem. Make it about a problem that you want to solve or an opportunity that you really want to nail, right? Because then it becomes real for you. And acknowledge that you're going to have to invest in its development. It's not something you're just going to put a ChatGPT over the top of it and launch the next day. It will take investment. And then I think there's two criteria. Any AI development needs data. So do your due diligence on getting your data, curating your data, managing your data, getting that input side right. And I can't stress, enough on the validate bit. And when we see all this ChatGPT, I shouldn't pick on them because they're not the only AI, but the chatbots and all that, validate. All right? Avoid those hallucinations. All right? So do your diligence on validating what you're producing. So this is a developer. But as a user who's saying, should I use something that's AI enabled, that's developed by AI? I would suggest a couple of things. Think about how much you trust the source. All right? Do you trust the source of who's developed it? All right? And then, that sounds like a broken record, the second thing is validate. All right? Because we're seeing a lot of misuse and we're seeing some really weird outputs of some of these AI engines, so validate those outputs. And that might be through experts, right, or others, but validate it before you take it on wholeheartedly. That'd be my advice.
Great.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah.
Good point, Dave. I think we need to remind ourselves that, in a sense, this isn't new to growers, to farmers. There's been a wave of ag tech that's gone through the system that has basically people knock on people's doors and says, here's a thing that will let you know everything about your crop and will tell you exactly what to do. And some people have fallen for the sales pitch when actually the device that was being sold to them or the solution that's sold to them actually isn't what it claims to be. So the landscape has already been littered with some disappointment. So you need to understand that. So that's where that adoption or innovation fatigue comes in. So the next time someone comes around and says, well, here's a nice new innovation, and now it's AI. And then the farmers say, well, are you sure? Because, and we've seen like people talk about NDVI, Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, as a way to monitor crops and vegetation. And a lot of, I would say, sales pitches just goes out to say, oh, I can do NDVI for you. With NDVI, you'll know exactly how much nitrogen to put out at this time of the season. When NDVI only gives you a certain measurement of the crop, which essentially is biomass, right? It doesn't necessarily tell you about what deficiency the crop might be facing, or what are some of the other problems, like, say, a pest attack that is actually, or a disease that's affecting the crop. So there's that sort of, I think people who produce or develop solutions need to verify, validate, check, peer review, talk to actual scientists, agronomists.
Involve universities, perhaps? Yes.
Who actually can critique and say, well, I don't think so. That's only part of the picture that you're telling, and you can't be selling a false hope to farmers. I don't mean to be negative, but I think it's important when you go into the market and developing something, it should develop confidence, and from there on you get momentum in adoption rather than sort of a slowdown because of disappointment.
So just to add on that, when I talk with industry, I have three scenarios in my head always. One is strategic. Let's say you have some spare funding and you want to actually tackle a problem that nobody knows how to solve, and you're willing to take the risk. Maybe you are the one creating the best new thing on actually how to attack a problem. And that's one scenario. The other one is I see that sometimes when you think about, I have problems in my normal business, and I try to solve the processes that are working bad or the processes that are working quite well. And where should I put AI on top of it? And most often I see that the choice is whatever is not working well, let's throw AI and see if it solves it. And my take on that is that don't. Just don't, because let's say your customer service is not happy, just throw a chatbot and see if it fixes it. It won't, right? Whereas when you have something that works well, you have gold there. You just boost it. So if you have someone in the farm that is really good at knowing how to manage the farm, ask them what they need. Maybe you can actually boost their monitoring capabilities, right? And that's where I see the big opportunity in AI or any technology.
Great. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just chip in again?
Absolutely.
Because what Neera says resonates a lot, because I've spoken to some farmers as well, and other people work with farmers. And you need to talk to the farmer themselves and understand what did going through and what they're doing, in the sense that we need to remember that farmers are in farming because they like to farm. I'm not a farmer, so I sort of live it vicariously. Grew up a city boy, right? What do I know? But farmers really love to farm. And so we don't want to suppose that we want to automate everything, because as a farmer or someone who works with livestock, you still want to go and look at your animals. You care about them. You want to look at them. You want to actually see how they're going. You want to ensure that the feed that's going out there isn't bad, isn't spoiled. So, you probably don't want to be moving around with a hammer looking for nails. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we only have time for one more question from me before we ask the audience for questions. So I'm going to ask the looking forward question. So looking forward, what opportunities do you see for AI in agribusiness? And particularly ones that you think might be disruptive rather than ones that are more making us more efficient, because clearly there's huge opportunities to be more efficient, more effective at what we're doing. But yeah, let's speculate, look forward. What do you think? Starting.
Yeah, something that's really exciting, I think many of you would have heard about it, would be digital twins. So digital and agriculture, farm digital twins, or digital twins of farming landscapes. So again, it comes back to the ability to sense, to get data on different aspects of the landscape, and now dynamically, because you can get real-time or near real-time updates or information, and you've got to ingest it, you've got to analyze it, you've got to display it. And simulate or represent what's going on in the real environment. So that digital twin concept has been tried by a number of people already, and I think that's coming on the horizon to a stage where we aren't just representing what's going on or getting data fed into it and getting an update, but I think also probably to a stage at which you can have some predictive capabilities to that as well, and of course different scenarios that will come in. And I think that's what I think is very exciting. That's what we can look forward to, and if anyone's interested, we can
talk more,
work on it together. Yeah.
I think working in the bank, we see we look at financials a lot, and we are really interested in talking about profit and making sure that farming businesses can trade through the cycles. And we're seeing more and more disruption with a varying climate. We're seeing as well, there's regulation out there in some countries, and a lot of interest as well in emissions data in the climate context more broadly. And so some of the really exciting technologies that I'm seeing at the moment are to do with looking at genomes and predicting breeding traits, whether it's livestock or plants. And so I'm quite interested in the future state about adaptation of some of these plant species and animals to a changing climate, but also what it means for emissions reporting in farming businesses, because alongside accounting, financial accounting, emissions accounting is becoming more and more important as well. So I think that that's probably the rise of, the climate as a topic of adaptation and emissions is something that I hope that AI has a really big part to play in accelerating our understanding and adaptation.
Thanks. Dave.
We've touched on a few things, like the predictive nature of AI is really important. So it's just moving from monitoring to predictive, and so it's a lot more insightful. I think a couple of things are sort of nagging at me a little bit. One's the trust issue with these AI chatbots and things, and I think our trust is being eroded in some of them because they are producing some weird and wonderful hallucinations. And so we've got to get around the trust. We've got to think about the human-AI interaction. So we talked about autonomy, a little bit, and often people think, oh, is this going to replace my job? We've got to somehow get it, how does AI enable us to do our job better? So how does the human and the AI... When you think about the chatbots and the way we interact with it, that interface is really interesting because it's very conversational, it's very intuitive. It asks you questions and you answer them, and it guides you through a journey. You should be guiding it through a journey. But it's that interaction. So I think we can do that better. But I guess the one bit that in that generative AI, so the chat GPT sort of area for me, is at the moment, if you ask it questions, and I've seen some very deep science research areas that are really trying to delve into, for example, giving climate adaptation advice using scientific literature. It's still coming up with these generic answers that are not over and above what people already know or they can already access. So it's got to become more locally specific and more meaningful for the person asking the question and get beyond the generic stuff. So for me, that's the big opportunity. And can I just say, 10 years ago, I don't think we would have known we'd be here with AI. It's here to stay. It's not a fad. So we've got to sort of get on and embrace it. But I think that the opportunity is really nailing that specificity versus the generalisable fluffiness that it can sometimes deliver.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to borrow a few things that have been said and try to build a story around it. So let's say you live in you have to manage a farm, for example, and I imagine that the logistics that you're managing it's hell, at least for me, that I live in a lab. So managing this complexity, if you have a plan, like how to work it out, I imagine that the default behavior is change as little as you can, and as long as it works. But we live in an environment that is constantly changing, and it requires us to actually revisit those plans or those supply chains quite often. We just do the minimal change, and so we go, right? And there are many opportunities that we're missing, many local optimas, what we would call, not minimizing waste enough. And so what can we do? Can we use data? Well, by default, by definition, if the world is changing, the data that you acquired is not useful. So then ties a bit with digital twins, but maybe not built from data, but built from first principles. We have a lot of knowledge about how the world works, let's use it. Once we use it, we can simulate and explore possible futures and create plans that are adaptive and can actually lift the burden from the farmer on thinking, oh, wow, things are changing. What are the options that I should consider? So that's something that I see there's a lot of focus. Planning per se in the research world is a hard problem. So in LLMs, so large language models, ChatGPTs, etc., it's seen as the next frontier. So you ask a ChatGPT or any chatbot to plan, to come up with any plan, the simplest thing that you can figure out, it won't do it well. Right? So it's an active area of research nowadays. Now, what will enable having robust planning and being able to think about the future? Well, we can take it out of the lab. We can take it out of the greenhouse and structured environments. Maybe robotics can help to go into the fields. And autonomy, I would say it's dangerous. I would say augmenting. We need to augment people's capabilities. Okay. That's a little bit my overview.
Thank you. So yes, turning to audience questions, and goodness, lots of them. And why don't we start over here, and please use the microphone because we're being recorded.
Thank you. This is a bit of an open-ended question, and it stems off of the emissions question. There's a lot around carbon sequestration, carbon credits, and the use of AI to enable farms to know how much they're sequestering and thus how much credits. So I'd like to know from the panel what you think is working, not working, and needs to be solved to enable us to have a system that's accurate, but more importantly, what we're doing to the soil, which is great to put carbon in it, but what is it doing to the microbiome, which we also need to think about in the long term?
Who wants to start with that one?
I can.
Okay, you go, and then I'll do a plus one.
I think is you, Alexis.
Yes. I love soil. That's a great question. Actually, if you look at, if you think about and look at what's going on in soil processes and carbon sequestration, I think we need to be very careful when we assume that the carbon that's sequestered in the soil via the plant is stable, because there's a whole load of different dynamics that occur that actually brings that carbon back out into the atmosphere, out from the soil. I have a PhD student working on this, and that's actually using a whole range of machine learning methods. We've taken data from the CSIRO SCARP project, carbon survey project across different agricultural areas. And what we have done is actually to look at the soil carbon stock and the major factors that affect soil carbon and the types of soil carbon. So particulate organic carbon, which is more unstable and labile, and mineral-associated organic carbon, which is more stabilized with minerals and clay and oxides and so on. So, and what we've actually seen from that database is, from analyzing it, is that the dynamics that affect the types of carbon that are in the soil differ according to, obviously, climate, but also different soil types, and also with the different types of crops that are grown as well. So whether you're on a broadacre cereal crop or pasture. So what I'm trying to say is it's more complex than we think, and we do have methods to estimate the soil carbon stock that's been added, through all these schemes, right? But I think they represent a sort of like a best possible estimate effort that is practical, that can be done across the country and to other places as well. So, yeah, I don't have a perfect answer for you, but that's my comment. Yeah.
Okay. Good. The gentleman in the back, the black and the back.
We've heard climate change raised a number of times, and I think we all know that the agricultural sector, particularly in terms of its heavy reliance on livestock production, is producing a lot of emissions. Now, from what I've read about AI, it's extremely energy intensive, requires a lot of electricity, and in many cases more emissions. And it also requires a great deal of water to cool down the data centers. So I'm going to throw that in the mix because I think there's a little bit too much enthusiasm on the panel, if I may be so rude, about AI. I'm not so enthusiastic.
Who wants to tackle that one?
So I'm not sure what the question is, but I do hear. Hopefully, we came across as a little bit enthusiastic, but also a little bit cautious, because my viewpoint is that we've got to be careful of the hype around AI. We've got to use it in ways that are fit for purpose. We've got to get smarter about how we use it. And so that is probably my key message behind it. It's not a cure-all for everything. So that's my sort of warning. If you put a disclaimer on the thing, AI is great, but it's not a cure-all for anything. You've got to be smarter about how we use it.
And yeah, I would add, I mean, it's spot on, the comment. I would say there's many computational approaches, many fields in AI that know how to solve problems with very little energy, but yet we choose the one that is most complex and most energy inefficient. Why? Well, I think there are other reasons at play. And so I would also think that there's a bit of a smoke there, and that we should look behind what are the motivations on pushing that trend, right? And I leave it that as an open thing to think.
Thanks. The gentleman in the maroon, yeah.
Thanks, I'm Ian Blair, Agricultural. Two questions, if I may. One to CSIRO, the benefits that came from that virtual fencing is using animal AI for herding. So you cut down on your cattle rustling, you were able to see the lengths of time that they were grazing, and so animal health, mating. So that area of animal AI which we are not using. And that also brings us to human AI with mental health. That wasn't meant, and yet before the lecture, I was talking to someone and saying, big problem with living on your own on a farm. And AI could be hugely important in helping diagnose and mentoring them. So your comments, please.
I think that's mostly directed at me.
Yes, I think so.
So you're right, virtual fencing is an interesting one. So just to go back a little bit, essentially an animal can wear a collar, and it was purported to make it into an ear tag. And there's monitoring systems with ear tags. It's a bit like they used to call it a Fitbit for animals, you know, like the Apple Fitbit. And so the basic application was you monitor activity. And you could say how much is it grazing, how much is it ruminating, how much is it resting, for example. And the dairy industry does this pretty well. There's a lot of ankle tags and things in the dairy industry for monitoring dairy cows and then relating it to milk yield and so on, and issues like mastitis, just as an example. So that monitoring bit can give you insights about behaviour, which then you can infer whether it's it might be a disease thing, or it could be a stage of lactation, for example, whatever it happens to be. And I'm going to get to the human bit in a minute, just bear with me. The virtual fencing bit then adds to it a level of control. So it sort of says above the monitoring, whereas control. So in effect, the technology could potentially give you multiple applications for monitoring, for health status, for production, for welfare, but also help you control the location of animals and move them, for example, from an area where there's limited feed to an area there's sufficient feed. Or you can muster them, up in the expanses of Northern Australia. You might only see the animals twice a year if you're lucky. It might cost you $2.50 per head per year to muster them. You've got helicopter crews and mustering crews and all that kind of stuff. You could, in fact, bring the animals in and make that mustering exercise a lot more efficient. So there's those applications. Now, human health is not an area of mine that is an expertise, but I'm going to take the lead for the sake of the conversation. I think you're right. I do understand in the human health area there's a number of innovations, particularly in aged care, around monitoring homes, either using remote sensors to look at behaviour of people. So if movement suddenly becomes, it's an anomaly detection. Oh, this person usually moves this much per day, and then all of a sudden they're not moving so much a day. It's sort of like an alert system. And I know my mum, she'll hate me saying this, she's 88. She wears one of those alert bracelets so that if they have a fall, an alarm goes off and so on, and she lives on her own. So there are those systems in place, but you're right, that monitoring technology for the human sector, and I don't think we learn enough from the different sectors, to be honest. We don't look at the human health sector and necessarily really apply it to the livestock sector or vice versa. I think there's a lot of co-learning to do. But I think you're right, the ability to monitor can infer. We've just got to be careful what we infer. And that's the trick, is taking that leap from, the data says, to what it actually means. Yep.
I have met two people separately in the last month or so, and their smartwatch has detected a heart problem, oncoming heart attack, before they knew about it, and they took themselves to hospital, and thanks to the watch. So yeah, it's here now. Yep, everyone get a smartwatch.
What we've got to do
checked.
with some of the livestock things, I think this is a challenge for ag, is getting it down to a price point that's adoptable.
Yeah. And also with livestock, there is an element of behaviour, I think, with livestock that you rely on the animal responding to the signal as well. So maybe in outback Queensland, it's not practical to put on your livestock and expect them to stay within the perimeter, and particularly not because they're breeding as well, and there's young stock as well that, wouldn't necessarily have a collar on. So, there are some limitations to it as well, yeah.
And we do have the rural connectivity issue as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
The homestead might have internet capability, but the whole of the property doesn't necessarily. So how you connect these devices is still a challenge.
Thanks.
I hope that answers your question.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a question about soil carbon. I guess lots of farmers are interested in building soil carbon, but I guess the question's around how we can monitor that and how farmers can actually work out if they are or are not building soil carbon. Have we got any closer to using drones in connection with AI to help us work out whether what we're doing with soil carbon? Can we do some scanning and work it out?
There'd be an Alexis.
Yes, the remote sensing, proximal sensing technologies will enable you to get an estimate of your soil carbon. But we need to know essentially that when we do that remote sensing, we are just getting information about probably the top 5 centimeters of the soil. If we're sequestering carbon and primarily through the roots and organic material getting down to depth, then you need some other way to estimate how much is down there. And I understand that there are some other colleagues who are modeling, SGSRO, who are modeling the biomass under the soil surface, below ground biomass that is going in, and what fraction of that is being sequestered through the process in the soil. But of course, there's still quite a lot of unknowns. The models can probably be calibrated and validated and that sort of thing. And AI, of course, will help to build those models as well.
But I mean, at the moment, doing a soil test is standard practice if you want to do a soil carbon project. So, and that can be quite cost prohibitive as well. It's really expensive if you want to do a soil carbon project on your farm. You really need to weigh up, you know, am I happy to spend the money? And then we get into contractual arrangements with people who share in the cost and the benefit potential if you sequester carbon. So it's quite a complex field. Then moving on to, you know, the project space as well to generate ACCUs. Yeah.
Yeah, but ACCUs. So analytics for soil are also coming in with the help of AI. So if you're looking in the near infrared and mid infrared range, then you can get, plus the visible range in the spectra, you can get a good estimate of soil organic carbon. Yeah, but not the type.
So we're running out of time. Maybe the gentleman right here. We've only got 4 more minutes, I believe.
We've been very much on the land at the moment, but in South Australia you've got the algal bloom problem. Do you think AI is going to have a quick solution there?
So I would try to maybe go back to the question whether we should think about AI as a solution at all. It can help us monitor, but I'm not sure it can solve the root causes. But then I'm no expert in the actual biological aspects.
Oh, I mean, I think that there is an element of AI usage because we understand the problem now, and we've got some great spatial data which can show us where the problem is. And there's forward forecasting that's happened. There's models based on projected climate conditions, the current status of the catchment. So certainly that is projecting forward what a scenario could be. So I think it's here now. Can we change the outcome? Maybe cloud seeding and, a big flush of water through the system might help, I'm not sure. But it's certainly being used now, with that spatial recognition of where the bloom is.
Thanks. And last question over. Yep.
Thank you. I get the last go. Great conversation. Thanks everybody. As opposed to clever, sophisticated rules-based computing, good AI is based on neural networks that are still nevertheless moderated by experts, and so are at the risk of bad faith actors controlling how the neural networks are moderated. So my question is, what does the panel see as the risks in AI of bad actors moderating the neural networks?
That's a tricky one. Maybe start.
Did you? I was just going to say significant. I think we see some examples of bad actors creating AI, chatbots for simple words, based on limited or biased information to create outputs to a particular end. So I think there is a real risk because we can all get a chat GPT to give a really strange answer if we want to direct it in that way. So I think there is a significant, so it comes down to the underlying trust. How do we ensure these things produce insights that are reliable and trustworthy? And unfortunately, we're seeing some instances where that's not happening.
Yeah.
And I suspect the question is found in the fact that you've experienced or observed similar.
Well, I think there is no shortage of examples in, say, social media.
Yeah.
Big tech firms that are just moderating.
So, I mean, I think we should start thinking about regulatory frameworks, right? And I think the European Union is much more advanced than other places. And they require transparency, interpretability, explainability, introspection. And if you don't have that, well, then you leave it up to the good faith of the few actors that actually are sharing these products with us. And always when something is free, who's the product, right? There are many questions that are about thorny, and the only way is bringing accountability in a regulatory framework. And always not too much and not too little, right? You don't want to stop innovation, but you cannot let it loose because you want to make sure the best outcomes are the ones that we actually yield, not the bad ones.
Well, I have lots more questions I'd like to ask, but unfortunately we're out of time. I'm sure many of you we didn't get to, sorry, but please join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you. I'm Rupert Meyer, and I was asked if I'd just say a few words of thanks, which I'm very pleased to do. Indeed, it was a great conversation, and just getting started in a sense. Very, very interesting. Thank you to the 5 panellists, and thank you to those asking questions and engaging. And Paul, thank you to you for the support that you've given to the Samuel and June Horden Endowment and the enthusiasm with which you've approached these fireside chats. Concrete, I think, was the marching order as we sat down, and I think concrete we got. The words that I was hearing were risk and certainty and precision and value creation and thinking before acting, soil health and mapping, farm management software, climate projection, autonomy, holistic data, validation, trusting the source, the boosting role of AI, digital farming, adaptation and emissions, and cautious enthusiasm, to respond to one of the questioners. When I told my daughter that I was coming tonight, she's studying veterinary medicine here at Melbourne University. She thought I was coming to a session on artificial insemination in agribusiness. She may have been surprised at the conversation, but I think she would have actually have enjoyed it. The Samuel and June Horden Endowment, it was set up in memory of my maternal grandparents, who were both deeply engaged in the pastoral industry across Australia. And although I barely knew my grandfather, I got fortunately to know my grandmother extremely well. And she used to share with me how they yearned to run an agricultural enterprise with a greater predictability, a greater sense of predictability as a way of driving better outcomes in the long term. And predictability in agricultural enterprises, that's not always a thing. But to the extent that AI, in all of its adaptations, can actually assist in the practical day-to-day running and the predictability of future markets, of future weather conditions, of future soil types of, then that will be, in my opinion at least, a huge, hugely value accretive to this industry that means so much for the country. So thank you for taking us on part of this journey tonight and having us sort of think and focus our minds on the role of AI in agribusiness. And this is a space that's obviously going to grow in the years ahead. But thank you for launching us on the journey.